Hello, fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I am joined by Ira from SF Words of Wonder. Thank you so much for being here, Ira.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We both recently read The Hole in the Zero. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, and I think when I brought it up when I was going through the letter J in my science fiction library, I showed this, and Ira, that's where you saw that I was interested in reading it as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a while back, maybe a year ago, I bought a big lot of books on eBay. I'm kind of a sucker for that when you get them for a buck a piece
Oh,
or
heck
whatever.
yeah.
And I was going through, I'd never even heard of this. This is one of the books that came in there, and I always look them up, and just to kind of see what they're about. I read the back, and on Goodreads, one of the first comments was, "This is the trippiest book I've ever read." And I was like, "Well, I'm keeping that."
Right? I'm going to cut this out, but really quick, I just want to make sure this is true. Isn't this writer from New Zealand?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think this is the only science fiction he ever wrote.
Yeah, Michael Kennedy Joseph was a British-born New Zealand poet and novelist.
Yeah.
And he was born in 1914, which makes him kind of an older writer, but he didn't write this until like 67, I think. Yeah, so it was...
Yeah, and I'd never seen anybody talk about this book. I never saw it in the wild. And when you had it in your shelf tour, I was like, that's fate almost. We got to read this.
Right? Yeah, and we did talk about this a minute ago, but I'm going to say it again for the camera. The last page is a advertisement for Lord of Light, which is the book we talked about over on Ira's channel when I was a guest over there. So, yeah, a lot of serendipity going on here.
And you could have bought it for 95 cents plus 10 cents for handling. So
Right?
$1.05, yeah.
Yeah, and this one was 75 cents. I think
Yeah.
we have the exact same edition, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with just a little bit of the synopsis, and I'll throw it over to you for that, Ira.
All right. So the setting and the setup for this one I thought was fantastic. We had this guy, his name was Seth Paradine, yeah, and he was like a station master out on this planet that was basically at the very edge of the universe. And that's a concept that's hard to imagine, or we think the universe keeps going on, but this book kind of goes into what's beyond there, because there is something beyond that edge of the universe. But he's there as like station master. He has to keep an eye on everything that's going on out here, because galaxies have vanished into the edge of the universe, and all kinds of weird things happen. He's dabbled his toes out there in this weird space, I believe, and he's out there by himself, and he's surrounded by all these robots that have these specific duties, and they're kind of very highly advanced robots, so they give him some companionship while he's out here basically on his own at the edge of the universe. And then we have three people that come out to visit him, and the main guy, his name is Mr. Craig.
Yeah, Craig, yeah.
Yeah. And this book, it gets into the characters, but in my feeling, it was more of like their personality or the archetypal type people. So he was like this power seeker, and he was very powerful. And then he had with him his daughter and then her fiance, who's this albino. His name was Bill. And he was just this really kind of crazy character. He was, I would call, kind of a pleasure seeker.
Yeah.
And our station master is like someone that I could really relate to, someone who kind of is looking for order and seeking order in the universe and that kind of thing. So these three people come out to visit him. They kind of get an orientation. They check out his digs and all of his robots, and then they really want to go out into this unspace, or whatever you want to call this area. This is kind of one of their main goals, and they're really antsy to do it. And they kind of end up getting out there, and um, Bill, the pleasure seeker, kind of does something to get them almost like trapped out there in a way. And most of the novel takes place in this unspace area, and it's very interesting. It's very disorienting.
Yeah.
Trippy is a good word for it. I got lost in many sections of this because they were almost kind of branching parts of themselves out and trying to become better or more like what that archetype is for them in each kind of iteration that they were going through, and they were interacting with each other. And I'm definitely going to rely on you to try to explain that part a little bit more.
Yeah, the book gets really wild, and I tried to sprint through this. I started it before you did, Ira, and I sent Ira a text and said, "Oh my gosh, what do you think about this?" And he's like, "I haven't started yet," so I kind of spoiled a little bit. I'm sorry about that.
Well, actually, when I first got this book, I did start reading it, and then once they got into that zone, I stopped and I was like, I need to read this when I'm in a different mind space. So I think
Oh,
I had read that part. You didn't spoil anything
oh,
for me.
good.
Just
Yeah, that's right. Because you tried to read this like quite a while ago, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah. So I was kind of trying to zip through this, and I had to really put on the brakes and let things sink in. And I'm not gonna lie, I dreamt about this book because I was trying so hard to slow down and let all this in, and it created. And I'd often be reading it at night before I'd fall asleep, so I would sometimes be reading groggy, and I actually had dreams about this book, which I haven't done in a long time. This is very complex because the setup, like you said, I love the setup. I think it's first two chapters are absolutely incredible because of the idea of this is the end of the universe, and there is nothing outside the end of the universe, but it is absolutely incomprehensible to us. We can't understand it, and stuff just keeps disappearing into this nothingness. So he's out there watching this nothingness, and you're absolutely right. These characters show up that are caricatures. Crag is this brash businessman that has used just kind of strength of will to make as unbelievable amounts of money, and he's used bad tactics. He was making planets war against each other. Not the greatest of guys. His daughter, I think, is presented as kind of the typical spoiled rich kid that everything is boring and nothing interests her. And then
A bit neurotic.
yeah, exactly. And then Bill, who I think's last name is Messenger, or Messinger or something.
Yeah.
He was like this poverty-struck kid that Crag picked up and built up to be this kind of mob boss for him that helped him
Like a
get
protege.
that helped him get all these riches, and then decided, okay, this is the kid I want to leave everything to, and gave him all this plastic surgery in order to make him worthy of marrying his daughter. And the book starts with the daughter has said, I want to go out to see this. And the dad and Bill are like, okay, let's go see it. And they go to this, is it an asteroid he's on?
Yeah, I think they called it a
Yeah.
planetoid. I don't think it's a full planet.
And it was an artificial planetoid, right? They made this planetoid.
Uh,
And the robot, I just wanted to pop in because the robot, I think there's two robots. And one's a dog, and the other one plays every part. So the
yeah.
robot will leave the room as the butler and come in as the cook and
Or
change
the
its
maid.
yeah, and change its accent. But the book to me seemed very Dickian at this beginning.
Yeah.
There's literally a part where the dog runs in, and Helena, the daughter of Crag, gets super excited and is like, "Is that a real dog?" And everybody is like, "Oh, you don't ask that. That's inappropriate to ask that, because of course it's not a real dog." And I really started thinking of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And this whole thing played that way, like it was Dickian.
Yeah.
And so at first I was like 100% in, and then they go into the nothing. And this is why it's called The Hole in the Zero. They go through what he calls, in a metaphorical way, the hole in the zero, the nothing. They go into the nothingness. And that is a heavy setup, because you have to come really strong with an opening like that to nothing. The minute they're in that nothing, my interest was piqued so high. And it starts with just it's one chapter, and it's these weird vignettes that are all four of them, like Bill is on a bird planet, and he's like this general in this bird army. And then Crag is this weird rock creature that lives underground and slowly eats minerals and makes his way above ground, and he's like the first of his species to do that. I think Helena was a tree that was connected to this whole forest, and there's just these different planets. And what was Paradine? I think he was a
He was like he was didn't he initially go into that like the army, and he was or in some sort of war setting, and he was like in charge of blankets or
yes,
towels or whatever.
yeah. So
It was like part of his persona of creating order or comfort or whatever. You know,
yeah,
each thing that these people were set up in initially was part of that persona.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is, I think we said this earlier, that you really can't spoil this book. I mean, there's a very cool ending that I don't want to give away, but I will. I'm going to do a deep read of this later as well. But the next couple of chapters for me made me start slightly souring on this book, which was too bad. I was like, this has been brilliant, because it kind of turned into this. Well, at first he started messing with the concept of the multiverse. He introduced these characters, and every decision they made, he would outline. And in one universe this happens, and in one universe this happens, but then he'd follow one specific universe. That was brilliant. I really liked that. And then it turned into this weird spy fiction thing, and that still was connected to the multiverse. But if we would have reviewed this at this point, I would have said that the novel was kind of falling down for me at that point, because with a premise like going to the end of the universe and getting trapped in there, I expected real crazy weirdness, and it was not much. And I remember at one point thinking, this started out as Philip K. Dick and turned it into like Laumer. There was a specific Laumer book that I read that was him messing with the concept of the dream machine, and he did some weird stuff, but he kept this real film noir, hard-boiled thing going on, spy fiction thing going on all the way through it, and I wasn't as much of a fan as that. And Philip K. Dick comes at everything with a sense of humor, and the beginning of this book had that sense of humor, but I felt like it lost here and started to drag. And then I hit chapter 6, and from then on, I thought this book was absolutely incredible. So in the end, I would just say that it drags a little right at the first couple of chapters. But when this thing hits its pace, Chapter 6, I had to read 3 times. I had to read through it, start over, read through it, start over, read through it, because it was chaos. It was all 4 people realizing that they have control over the worlds that they're inhabiting, warring against each other for control of the world. And Helena's like this sea goddess that creates life and comes out of the sea. And Paradigm is like this crazy monk that is like a Frankenstein that created a monster that was able to talk like a proper British chap right when he came out, or right when he was born. Crag is like Genghis Khan, and Billy is a pleasure seeker, like you said. All of their caricatures really, I mean, even what you said about order, that was really brilliant, right? Because Paradigm's trying to create life and order this world so that he has control and understanding of every aspect of this world. And it is absolutely chaos, as it would be if everybody was trying to run the world at one time. It was insanity. Go ahead.
Yeah, and they were kind of like, almost like lucid dreaming when they realized that they actually had the ability to change their outcome. But it seemed like to me, each person still had an effect on the other people, and there was this kind of battle of wills in a way going on, and each person could affect the other one in a way. And I will agree with everything you said. The setup of this was great. There was, I think it was all the way through chapter 4, I was all the way in. I think maybe chapter 5 is where it got kind of that slowdown section.
Uh-huh.
Maybe 4 and 5. And I think I probably should have done what you did. Once I got to that chapter 6, I was already kind of confused and just kept going without going back and trying to make sense of all the madness that was going on.
Yeah, and it was madness. It was wild. I mean, like I would read half of it and just be like, I have to stop, and then I'd open the book again and start where I left off and realize I had to go backwards because none of the words were making any sense whatsoever. Yeah. So yeah, it was wild. And I think 6 is the wildest, straight up. I think 6 is the wildest because, and I kept wrestling with like what this book was. I was like, is this a fix-up novel where the hole in the zero concept is going to be the bookends, and then that we're going to get each person's going to live a different story? So I was kind of expecting full stories, which they're not. You don't get full stories. It always just degrades into kind of multi-universe madness. And I don't want to give anything else away, but I want to push. So I really like this book, and I highly recommend that you read this book. And the brilliance of it for me was at the end, these stories get weirder and weirder, with 6 being the weirdest, and then a little bit of a return to normalcy. But there is a whole section of body horror that like freaked me out, that was like so creepy, that was 100% worth the read. And then there was a whole section that was a retelling of a fairy tale that like grappled with the concepts of immortality through myth and the reality of myth versus the stories, as they go through the telephone game through history to create the final mythic version of that, like King Arthur, right?
It got very kind of medieval for a while.
Yeah.
That tone, and it got a little bit easier for me to understand that part. I marked this down. I have a little thing where I keep track of my books. I definitely marked this down as a reread at some point, and I'm very excited to hear or watch your video of the deep read on this one. Because the ending, I definitely must have missed something. in the ending of this one. I don't really want to give anything away, but like you said, I thought it was going to be bookends,
Uh-huh.
and we kind of never had that final bookend, I guess.
Right, and the whole time I
In
was
the way
reading
I
it,
expected.
and maybe I'm going to give this might be a giveaway. The whole time you're expecting it to end a certain way,
Yeah.
because narrative trains us to believe that when a problem is presented, the problem in the end will be solved and everybody will grow and be better people, right? We expect that. This doesn't do that. And it doesn't just peter off. It ends in a brilliant way that I did not see coming at all, that shocked me and that I really loved. And I don't think it could have ended any other way, because you set up this concept that people fall into the hole in the zero, the end of the universe, and what do they get? It's like the black hole movies, right?
Yeah.
When you go to a black hole, how do you describe that as a writer?
Yeah.
I mean, it's intense.
It's an unfathomable concept that you figured how could he pull this off, and he's just gonna. I thought, like you said, I wouldn't call it cheating, but I thought there was going to be an outcome where you have traditional character arcs, and they were going to come out of this thing and maybe learn something about themselves or grow as characters or whatever. But if this is a very unconventional novel, and it stayed unconventional.
It did, and boy, I just got happier and happier and happier as I read it, because it stopped being Keith Laumer style pretty quick and started being kind of Harlan Ellison. There were points here that felt like I have no mouth and I must scream, not to the gut. Although the body horror in that one got me. But yeah, I feel like this writer was somewhere between Harlan Ellison and Philip K. Dick in this novel, and I for people that love the weird, this is absolutely incredible, worth a read. I'm going to say it's not a long read, but it was a very long read for me because I had to go back and reread it. It's 191 pages.
Yeah, it's definitely not something like I'm a pretty fast reader. This took me, for a less than 200-page book, it took me a lot longer. And I was always, when I was reading, I was like, I can't stop reading here because I'm not going to be able to pick it back up and know what's going on. And I would try to find a spot where I could pick it up the next day. And even then, I was going back at least a couple pages to try to figure out where we were in this madness to continue it on. Like, yeah, it was very challenging for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think looking up some things afterwards, I think you probably did the best thing, is putting in the extra work while reading it, because it seems like all the people that give it negative reviews, or me kind of feeling like I didn't get quite an ending that I expect. Well, I don't know that I fully understood the ending, but I think in a reread, I would definitely think a lot higher of this book. Although I still really loved it.
Yeah, and the best part about it, and this might be a way to describe what I look for on my channel all the time, and that is, it seems like nonsense, but if you delve into it, I don't think it is nonsense. And of course, that's up to the reader and the eye of the beholder. But I feel like the nonsense organizes itself when you really give it the time to do so. Because there are some things I've read, and I might get it from a lot of booktubers for saying this. Philip Jose Farmer's Riders of the Purple Wage, Riders of the Purple Wage. No matter how much I read into that, I couldn't really. It just seemed like nonsense. No matter how many times I reread it, and those kind of books fall flat for me. And it could just be that I didn't come up with an interpretation that made sense to me for that one, but I did with this one. And that's, I mean, again, like what we come up with for these books is completely in the eye of the beholder. But this one, I felt like was very organized and was really saying something very interesting about humans, but also about the universe in the ending. And I'll go into that a lot more in my deep read. But yeah, I highly recommend this to readers. But like you said, with the caveat that you have to let this one sink into your brain and maybe reread it a couple of times for it to work.
Yeah, and maybe a tip, it's purposely confusing and disorienting and all that, and I thought that was just part of it, and I kind of kept reading and not maybe fully understanding what he was doing, because as soon as you start reading this, it's obvious he's a great storyteller. I mean, it was written in the 60s. It doesn't, even though it's about the characters, it's not really like they're about their individual personalities as much. It's got a different style and tone to it, but he is a marvelous storyteller and crafted this like kind of unfathomable situation and does a pretty good job explaining something that's hard to explain.
Yeah, I think he was he wrote a really famous, especially in New Zealand, war novel. So I think that he's used to writing some pretty dark stuff, and I think that he's considered a really literary writer. So I think you're right. I think this is his only foray into science fiction, and it was really really worth it. All right. Yeah. Anything else you want to say?
Not really. I think I think I made a. So we did Lord of Light, and then we were kind of brainstorming some other books to read. And since I had tried this before, and I know what you like to read on your channel, I'm really glad that you like this.
Yeah.
I feel like when you can recommend a book to someone based on what you think, and then they like, I feel like I'm getting to know you better and your style of reading. And I knew this was challenging to me, and you're almost like my reading coach in these kinds of books. And so I think this was a great one to pick, and that is just fitting that Lord of the Light was in the ad in the back. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, because this was not on my list. I mean, I of course it was on my list because I own it. Eventually I want to read all of these, but yeah, when we talked, you were like, I don't know, this one. And I was like, whoa, because it was just such a random choice, but you're absolutely right. This is straight up my alley.
You said, let me go read the back again. And you went and read the back and you're like, I'm in.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I don't know how easy these are to find. I have no idea. Hopefully they're out there on eBay. When I looked, I saw a couple of hardbacks of this, because I like to try to get first editions for the books that I really enjoy, and they were like $75 to $80 for the hardbacks, which I can't throw down that much. So I'm glad to have this one, and I could only open it this much, so I was like, I had the light right behind me, because the spine. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and I'm sure next time, I guess we can do one on your channel. That's one of the ones that are in the series you're doing.
Sure. I filmed my halfway mark video because I'm 70 books through the 140. I put a whole list of, all the books that are to come. There's some great ones on there, but I'm up for basically anything. But when you look at that list, just hit me up and we'll plan the next one.
Well, everybody go check out Ira's channel, SF Words of Wonder. I'll put a link down in the description to see what is the series you're reading again? I forgot the name.
It's a list of books that Easton Press put together called The Masterpieces of Science Fiction, and I just found this list like about 25 years ago, before I was really into the internet or other people, recommending great books to me, and I've found so many great authors and books through this list. So I'm reading through the whole 140 list, and I'm halfway through at this point.
Have you liked most of them?
Yeah, almost all of them. There's definitely books that aren't really science fiction on the list. It kind of makes you scratch your head. Um, I'm okay with it because they're all good books, but
Yeah.
even, I'm just a lover of reading. Even like my least favorite book that I've read on this list is something I probably would have tried to read anyways. And I feel like at the end of a bad book, I still feel better than at the end of like watching a bad movie,
Yeah.
even though you invest more time into it, I think, just from the love of reading or something. But
Absolutely. Well said. I agree. Yeah, so go over, check out Ira's SF Words of Wonder. When I first started watching your channel, I thought it was SF Worlds of Wonder.
I'll take that one too.
And I think I misspelled it a couple of times back in the day. Yeah, so check out SF Words of Wonder. There's a link in the description. You can watch him talking about the Easton Press series of, what was it, World's Greatest Science Fiction? Masterpieces of science fiction. Ira, thank you so much for doing this with me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I can't wait to do it again.
I agree. Next time, your channel.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks.